There comes a time in life when human strength reaches its limits, when the weight of worry bends the soul, when plans crumble into dust, and when no amount of effort seems to turn things around. It is in these moments that one must ask, what do I do now? The mind races for answers. The heart searches for comfort, but nothing seems to satisfy. This is the point where faith is tested, where trust is demanded, and where surrender becomes the only way forward. The question is, can you let go? Can you leave everything in God's hands? We live in a world where control is an illusion. Men and women build their futures like architects designing towers, believing that if they plan well, if they work hard enough, if they make the right choices, then success is guaranteed. But what happens when, despite all your planning, things still fall apart? What happens when the relationship you invested years in suddenly collapses? What happens when the business you sacrificed for crumbles overnight? What happens when the dream you carried for so long is shattered before your eyes? It is in these moments that many break, many lose hope, and many abandon their faith. But those who understand the power of surrender, those who have learned to leave everything in God's hands, find a different path, one of peace, assurance, and divine intervention. There is a deep mystery in surrender. It is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not a sign of giving up. Surrender is power. It is the wisdom to understand that the hands of God can carry what your hands cannot. It is the courage to admit that your strength has limits, but His power has none. It is the faith to know that what is beyond your control is still under His authority. Many wrestle with God, trying to hold on to burdens they were never meant to carry. They fight battles that were never theirs to fight. They labor over things that only God can fix, and in their struggle they find frustration instead of peace, exhaustion instead of strength, and fear instead of faith. But the moment you release it, truly release it, into His hands, you enter into a realm where miracles happen, where doors open on their own, and where God takes what was broken and makes it whole again. Abraham understood this. He waited years for the promise of a son, and when Isaac finally arrived, God asked him to lay him down, to let go, to trust. That moment was not about sacrifice, it was about faith. It was about knowing that if God gave the promise, He could sustain it. And so Abraham placed his son in God's hands. And what happened? Provision met him at the altar. The ram was already waiting in the thicket. The answer was already prepared before the test even came. That is what happens when you leave things in God's hands. His provision overtakes your problem. But what if the waiting seems endless? What if the answer is delayed? This is where many grow weary, where many start to take matters into their own hands. They become impatient with God's timing. They want solutions now. They want breakthroughs immediately. And when God doesn't move on their schedule, they try to force things into place. But what they do not realize is that when you rush ahead of God, you birth things that were never meant to be. Sarah and Abraham tried to help God's promise by bringing Hagar into the picture, but instead of peace, it brought conflict. Instead of a solution, it brought struggle. When you take matters into your own hands, you create unnecessary battles. But when you leave it in God's hands, He makes all things beautiful in His time. Some are carrying pain they do not know how to release. They have been wounded by life, betrayed by people they trusted, disappointed by outcomes they never expected. And they hold on to it, replaying the hurt over and over, trying to make sense of what happened. But healing does not come through understanding. It comes through surrender. It comes when you stop trying to figure out why and start trusting who. The one who knows the end from the beginning. The one who sees what you cannot see. The one who can turn even your deepest sorrow into a testimony of His goodness. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused and thrown into prison, he had every reason to hold on to anger. He had every right to question why God allowed such injustice. But Joseph understood something most do not. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. He refused to hold on to bitterness. He refused to carry what was not his to carry. And because he left it in God's hands, God lifted him from the prison to the palace. Some of you are holding on to things that are keeping you bound. But if you would release it, if you would leave it in God's hands, you would see that He has a greater plan than what you could ever imagine. Leaving everything in God's hands does not mean sitting still and doing nothing. It means obedience. It means taking the steps He tells you to take, but not forcing the doors He has not opened. It means trusting that when you do your part, He will do His. The farmer does not sit in his house waiting for a harvest without planting seeds, but neither does he dig up the ground every day to check if the seed is growing. He does his part and leaves the rest to God. So must you. Do what He has asked you to do, but leave the results in His hands. Some of you are in a storm right now. The winds are fierce, the waves are high, and you do not see a way out. Fear whispers that you will drown, that this will be the end. But let me remind you, Jesus was in the boat with the disciples when the storm arose. And though the storm was raging, He was asleep. Not because He did not care, but because He was in control. The disciples panicked, but Jesus rested. That is the difference between those who try to carry the storm and those who leave it in God's hands. One is full of anxiety, the other is full of peace. And when they finally woke Him, He stood and spoke to the wind and the waves, and instantly the storm ceased. But notice something. The storm did not wake Jesus. The cries of His disciples did. Your storm does not shake God. It does not threaten Him. It does not trouble Him. But your prayers, your surrender, your faith, those move Him. When you leave it in His hands, you release His power to work on your behalf. There is nothing too great for His hands to hold, nothing too broken for His hands to mend, nothing too lost for His hands to restore. If He holds the universe together, He can hold your life together. If He sustains the stars in the sky, He can sustain you. Your future, your dreams, your worries, your struggles, place them in His hands. Trust Him, believe Him, rest in Him. And you will see what He does with what you surrender. There is a peace that cannot be explained when a person fully surrenders to God. It is not the peace that comes from having everything figured out, nor is it the peace that comes from knowing every detail of how things will work out. It is a peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that is rooted in trust. This is the kind of peace that guards the heart of those who have learned to leave everything in God's hands. It is the peace that allowed Paul to sing in prison, the peace that allowed Daniel to sleep in the lion's den, the peace that allowed Jesus to stand silent before His accusers. They knew something others did not. They knew that nothing in this world could shake what was in God's hands. Yet so many still struggle to let go. They say they trust God, but in the secret places of their hearts, they still hold on. They still try to control outcomes, still try to force things to happen in their own way, still try to carry what was never theirs to carry, and the weight of it crushes them. Anxiety rises, fear overtakes them, and exhaustion becomes their portion. But they do not realize that they are wrestling against their own peace. They do not realize that the very thing they are fighting to keep is the thing they need to release. Because when you place something in God's hands, you are not losing it, you are securing it. Hannah understood this. She had longed for a child for years, and the weight of barrenness pressed on her soul like a heavy burden. She wept, she prayed, she cried out to God, but the moment she made a vow, the moment she surrendered her future child to God before he was even conceived, everything changed. She was no longer sorrowful, no longer anxious, no longer burdened. She left it in God's hands, and in due time she held the answer in her arm. But what if she had kept holding on to the pain? What if she had refused to release her desires into God's hands? Would she have still received the promise? Some people are delaying their own breakthroughs because they refuse to surrender, they refuse to let go, they refuse to trust. But the moment you release it, the moment you stop fighting, the moment you place it in His hands, you will see how swiftly He moves on your behalf. Leaving everything in God's hands does not mean you will never face difficulties. It does not mean every day will be easy, but it means that no matter what comes, you will not be shaken. It means that even when the storm rages, you will stand firm. It means that even when doors close, you will not panic. because you know that the one who holds your future is also the one who controls the doors. The enemy wants you to believe that if things are not happening the way you expected, then God is not working. He wants you to believe that delays mean denial, that silence means absence, that hardship means abandonment. But when you leave things in God's hands, you recognize that even in the delay, He is working. Even in the silence, He is speaking. Even in the hardship, He is strengthening you. There are some burdens you have been carrying for far too long. The burden of past mistakes, the burden of guilt, the burden of regret. You replay old decisions, wishing you had done things differently, wishing you had made better choices, wishing you could go back and fix what was broken. But you cannot undo the past. You cannot rewrite history. What you can do is place it in God's hands. He is the only one who can take what was meant for evil and turn it for good. He is the only one who can take what was lost and restore it. He is the only one who can redeem time, rewrite stories, and bring beauty from ashes. But He cannot heal what you refuse to surrender. He cannot restore what you refuse to release. If you want to walk in freedom, if you want to move forward, if you want to see God's hand at work in your life, you must let go. Some of you are carrying the burden of offense. Someone hurt you, betrayed you, rejected you, mistreated you, and instead of releasing it to God, you have held onto it. You have nursed the wound, replayed the pain, and allowed bitterness to take root. But unforgiveness is a heavy weight. It does not harm the person who wronged you. It only harms you. It drains your joy, poisons your heart, and hinders your prayers. You were not meant to carry this weight. You were meant to leave it in God's hands. When you do, you will find that justice is not your responsibility. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. He is the one who sees. He is the one who repays. He is the one who makes all things right. Your job is to forgive, to release, to walk in freedom. There are those who struggle with fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of what the future holds. They live their lives in constant worry, constantly trying to secure their own destiny, constantly trying to control what only God can control. But fear is not from God. Fear is the enemy's way of keeping you bound, keeping you limited, keeping you from stepping into all that God has for you. When you leave your life in God's hands, fear loses its power. You begin to understand that He is already in your future. He has already made a way. He has already gone before you. And if He is for you, who can be against you? Some people pray, but they do not leave their prayers in God's hands. They pray, but then they pick up their worries again. They bring their burdens before God, but then they walk away carrying them once more. But true faith does not work that way. True faith lays everything down at the feet of Jesus and leaves it there. It does not pick it up again. It does not revisit the worry. It does not entertain the doubt. It does not question the timing. It simply trusts. It trusts that God heard. It trusts that God will answer. It trusts that God is in control. That is why the Bible says to be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication to make your requests known to God. And what happens next? The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and mind. That is the power of leaving it in His hands. Even Jesus, in the greatest moment of His life, demonstrated what it means to leave everything in God's hands. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He wrestled with the weight of what was before Him. He knew the suffering that awaited Him, knew the pain, knew the agony, and in that moment He prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That was the ultimate act of surrender, the ultimate act of trust, the ultimate act of leaving everything in God's hands. And because of that surrender, salvation was made available to the world. When you leave everything in God's hands, you will see that He does exceedingly abundantly above all you could ask or think. You will see doors open that no man can shut. You will see battles fought on your behalf. You will see restoration where there was loss, healing where there was pain, and breakthrough where there was resistance. But it all begins with surrender. It all begins when you stop fighting, stop striving, stop trying to control what was never yours to control. It begins when you trust, when you rest, when you place everything in the hands of the one who holds the universe together. The same God who fed Elijah in the wilderness, who parted the Red Sea for Moses, who shut the mouths of lions for Daniel, who raised Lazarus from the dead, who calmed a storm for his disciples, who defeated death itself. This same God is the one who holds your life. Can you trust him? Can you release your worries, your fears, your burdens, your dreams? Can you place them in his hands and leave them there? If you can, you will see the power of a surrendered life. You will see what happens when you let go and let God. You will see that his hands are strong enough to carry what your hands cannot. You will see that his ways are higher, his plans are greater, his timing is perfect. And when you do, you will find a peace that nothing in this world can shake. There is a mystery in surrender that many fail to understand. It is not simply about letting go. It is about stepping into the realm of divine provision. It is about coming to the realization that the hands of God are not just strong enough to carry your burdens, but wise enough to shape your destiny. Those who try to control their own future often live in cycles of frustration, always striving, always fighting, always carrying loads they were never meant to bear. But those who have learned to leave everything in God's hands walk with a different posture. They walk with assurance, with rest, with an unshakable confidence that no matter what happens, they are held by a power greater than themselves. The greatest breakthroughs do not come by force, they come by surrender. A child does not have to beg his father for provision. He does not have to manipulate, to struggle, to fight for what already belongs to him. He simply rests in the knowledge that his father has already made a way. But too many live their lives like orphans, believing that they must strive for every good thing, that they must figure everything out on their own. They pray, but they do not believe. They ask, but they do not trust. They declare faith, but they walk in fear. And so they live burdened, anxious, restless, and exhausted. But God never intended for his children to live this way. He intended for them to abide, to trust, to walk in the peace that only comes when everything is truly left in his hands. Some people struggle to leave things in God's hands because they fear the outcome. They fear that if they surrender, they will lose control. But the truth is, control was never theirs to begin with. The breath in your lungs, the beat of your heart, the rising of the sun, none of it is in your control. You cannot add a single hour to your life by worrying. You cannot manipulate the course of events by stressing. And yet many live as though their worry has power. But worry does not change the outcome. It only robs you of peace in the process. Surrender, on the other hand, releases you from the burden of trying to control what only God can control. It shifts your focus from the problem to the promise, from fear to faith, from striving to resting. The children of Israel spent years wandering in the wilderness, not because God had not prepared the promised land for them, but because they could not release their own understanding. They saw giants instead of promises, obstacles instead of opportunities, and in their refusal to trust God, they delayed their own destiny. How many people today are still wandering because they refuse to leave their future in God's hands? How many are trapped in cycles of doubt, missing out on divine appointments simply because they cannot let go of their own reasoning? But those who leave everything in God's hands do not have to wonder. They do not have to figure out every step. They simply move when God says move. They wait when he says wait. And in doing so, they walk into the fulfillment of every promise prepared for them. There are people who say they have faith, but their actions reveal otherwise. Faith is not proven in moments of comfort. It is tested in seasons of uncertainty. When the storm is raging, when the answers are unclear, when the way forward is hidden, that is where faith is revealed. Anyone can trust God when things are going well, when prayers are being answered, when doors are opening. But true faith is seen when everything is uncertain, when the answers are delayed, when the doors remain shut. Will you still trust him then? Will you still believe when nothing makes sense? Will you still leave everything in his hands when it seems like he is silent? Those who trust, even in the silence, will see what others do not. They will see the hidden workings of God, the unseen movements behind the scenes, the way he aligns things in the spirit before they manifest in the natural. There are some who have been waiting for answers, waiting for breakthroughs, waiting for a sign that God is working. But faith does not wait for signs. It moves before sight. Noah built an ark before the rain came. Abraham walked toward a land he had never seen. The walls of Jericho fell after they marched in obedience. Those who leave things in God's hands do not wait for everything to make sense before they obey. They do not need full clarity before they move. They simply follow the voice of God, knowing that He does not reveal everything at once, but He always leads with purpose. Some are hesitant, some are fearful, some are delaying their own destiny because they refuse to trust the process. But if they would just leave it in God's hands, they would see that every step is already ordered, every detail already written, every provision already made. The enemy wants to keep people in a place of fear, a place of doubt, a place where they feel as though God has forgotten them. He wants them to believe that if they cannot see the answer, then there is no answer. But faith does not require sight. Faith moves before the door opens. Faith trusts before the answer comes. Faith praises before the victory is seen. That is the power of leaving everything in God's hands. It removes the weight of uncertainty, because trust replaces the need for answers. The need to understand is surrender to the assurance that even when nothing is clear, God is still in control. Some of the greatest moves of God have happened when people surrendered. When Moses stretched his rod over the sea, he had no power to part it, but the moment he obeyed, the waters moved. When David stood before Goliath, he had no human advantage, but the moment he placed his confidence in God, the giant fell. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he had no control over the water, but the moment he fixed his eyes on Jesus, he walked where others sank. The moment you leave everything in God's hands, you will step into realms you never imagined, you will see provision you never expected, you will experience victories you never fought for. But it begins with trust. Some of you have been waiting for God to move, but He is waiting for you to let go. He is waiting for you to stop trying to control the outcome. Stop trying to figure out every detail. Stop trying to make things happen in your own strength. The moment you leave it in His hands, you will find rest. You will find that the burden you were carrying was never yours to bear. You will find that the doors you were trying to force open will swing wide on their own. You will find that the healing you were striving for will flow naturally. You will find that what you were anxious about has already been settled in heaven. It is easy to trust God when everything is going well. It is easy to say that you have faith when the blessings are visible. But what about when everything looks impossible? What about when the reports are negative? What about when the doors remain closed? This is where trust is tested. This is where true surrender is revealed. Those who truly leave everything in God's hands do not panic when things do not go their way. They do not break down when the answer is delayed. They do not allow circumstances to dictate their peace. They understand that their lives are in the hands of the one who has never failed. Some people pray, but they do not truly believe. They bring their requests before God, but then they pick up their worries again. But if you have truly left it in God's hands, you will not walk away in fear. You will not continue to carry what you surrendered. You will walk with peace. You will walk with joy. You will walk with a confidence that nothing in this world can shake. That is the evidence of true trust. That is the evidence of a life fully surrendered. There is nothing in your life that is too big for God to handle. There is no situation too complex, no battle too fierce, no pain too deep. His hands can carry what yours cannot. His wisdom can solve what yours cannot. His timing is better than yours. His ways are higher than yours. His plans are greater than yours. But you will never see the fullness of what He has for you if you continue to hold on to what you were meant to release. The moment you place it in His hands and leave it there, you will see what He can do with what you surrender. The journey of faith is not one of simplicity, but rather one of trust. When we are truly walking by faith, we are not merely existing, but living out a divine story written by the Creator. It's easy to think we have everything under control, that our plan is the best, that we know exactly how everything will unfold. But the truth is, we only see a fraction of the picture, while God, the master weaver, sees the entire tapestry. What appears to be a moment of chaos or confusion to us may very well be a part of God's perfect design. The very things we try to control may be the areas in which God is trying to teach us the greatest lessons. Leaving everything in God's hands means abandoning the false belief that we can orchestrate every detail. It means recognizing that while we can plan and prepare, only God knows the perfect timing and the best path. We can make choices, But those choices are never independent of God's sovereignty. Our steps are ordered by Him, and our plans may align with His will or be redirected as He sees fit. In this surrender, we find freedom. Not a freedom from responsibility, but a freedom from worry. A freedom from anxiety about the unknown. A freedom from the weight of what is out of our control. This freedom does not remove us from challenges or obstacles. It empowers us to face them with courage, knowing that God holds our future in His hands. There is a certain divine wisdom that comes when we surrender our plans to God. It is the wisdom of recognizing that we are not alone in this journey, that there is a higher power at work, orchestrating our lives for His glory. When we understand that we do not have to fight every battle on our own, that we are not carrying the full weight of the world on our shoulders, we are liberated. No longer do we have to struggle under the constant pressure of trying to keep everything in place. We can take a deep breath and trust that God is at work in ways we may not see, but in ways that will always lead to something greater. Think about the way God provided for the Israelites in the wilderness. For 40 years they wandered in a desert, relying completely on God's provision for food and water. Every day they received manna from heaven. But that manna did not come because of their striving. It came because of their dependence on God. In the wilderness, they had no control over their circumstances. Yet they learned that when they relied on God, He would provide exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. This lesson was not just for them, it is for us today. Our wilderness moments, our moments of uncertainty, are the moments when we learn to trust God's provision, His timing, and His sovereignty. When we leave everything in God's hands, we also leave the outcomes in His hands. We no longer need to control how things turn out, because we know that God's plan is greater than our own. We no longer need to manipulate circumstances or force things to happen according to our desires. Instead, we allow God to work in His own time, knowing that His timing is always perfect. This act of letting go is not a passive surrender, but an active faith that engages with the truth that God's ways are higher than ours. We trust that God is not only concerned with the destination, but with every step along the journey. This surrender does not mean we stop pursuing what we believe God has called us to do. It does not mean we stop praying, stop seeking, or stop striving toward our goals. Instead, it means that we do all of these things with an open hand, recognizing that even our best efforts are ultimately in God's hands. It means that we do not become consumed by what we cannot control, but instead focus on what God has called us to in the moment. There is a peace that comes when we give our best and leave the rest to God. We no longer have to worry about how the story ends, because we trust that the author of our lives is working all things for our good. There are times when leaving everything in God's hands feels impossible, when the situation seems too dire, when the waiting becomes too long, and when we feel like we cannot hold on any longer. During these times, the temptation to take control is strong. The fear of the unknown can be overwhelming, and the doubt can cloud our vision. But it is in these very moments that God invites us to trust Him more deeply. It is in the darkest times that the light of His faithfulness shines brightest. The faithfulness of God is not contingent on our circumstances. It is steadfast and unchanging, no matter what we face. This is why, even in the midst of trial, we can find peace in knowing that He has us in His hands. Imagine a child walking along with a parent. The child may not know the way, but the parent knows exactly where they are going. The child may stumble, may trip, may get scared, but the parent's hand is always there to steady them. The child does not need to worry about the path because the parent is in control. In much the same way, when we leave everything in God's hands, we are trusting that He knows the way. Even when we cannot see ahead, we trust that He is leading us on a path of purpose, a path that will lead to His glory. We do not need to understand every twist and turn, but we can rest assured that He is with us every step of the way. When we leave everything in God's hands, we are also freeing ourselves from the burden of comparison. So often we get caught up in comparing ourselves to others, wondering why they seem to be succeeding while we struggle. But when we surrender our lives to God, we no longer need to measure ourselves against anyone else. We trust that God has a unique plan for each of us, that He is working in our lives according to His perfect will. Our journey is not the same as anyone else's, and that is okay. In fact, it is beautiful. The more we trust God with our lives, the more we realize that His plan for us is just as unique as our fingerprints. One of the greatest gifts of surrender is peace. The peace that comes from knowing that we are not alone in this journey. We may face challenges, but we are never left to face them on our own. We may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but we can trust that God's purposes are greater than our understanding. When we leave everything in His hands, we release the need to figure everything out, to have every answer, to control every situation. We simply trust that the one who knows us better than we know ourselves is guiding us in the right direction. There's a profound comfort in knowing that God is always with us, even when it feels like the world is falling apart. Even when things are difficult, we can rest in the knowledge that God is working all things together for our good. This is why, even in the midst of hardship, we can find peace. It is not a peace based on circumstances, but a peace based on the unshakable confidence that God is in control. His ways may not always make sense, and His timing may not always align with our own, but His plan is always perfect. This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of God in the midst of trouble. When we leave everything in His hands, we open ourselves up to the full measure of His presence. We invite Him to lead us, to guide us, and to strengthen us. We no longer have to face life's challenges alone. We are able to walk in the confidence that no matter what comes our way, we are more than conquerors in Christ. We are not defeated by our circumstances. We are victorious because of who we belong to. Surrendering to God is not a one-time act. It is a daily decision. Every day we are faced with the choice to trust or to worry, to surrender or to struggle. But when we choose to leave everything in God's hands, we are choosing to live in the freedom that comes with trust. We are choosing to believe that God's ways are higher, that His purposes are greater, and that He is always working behind the scenes for our good. As we continue to surrender more and more of our lives to Him, we begin to experience a peace that transcends understanding, a joy that cannot be shaken, and a confidence that comes from knowing that we are held in the hands of a faithful God. The more we surrender, the more we experience His faithfulness, and in His faithfulness, we find that everything we need is already in His hands. In conclusion, leaving everything in God's hands is not about passivity or surrendering to fate, but about trusting in the sovereignty of a loving and all-knowing Creator. It means recognizing that no matter how chaotic life may seem, God is in control, and His plan is always greater than our own. Surrendering to Him frees us from the burden of worry, fear, and control, allowing us to walk in peace, knowing that He is working all things together for our good. It's about moving forward with faith, even when we cannot see the full picture, trusting that God's wisdom and timing will never fail us. When we truly let go and place everything in His hands, we unlock the freedom to live with confidence and joy, knowing we are held by the one who holds the world in His hands. The journey of surrender is the path to ultimate peace and fulfillment.